The silence in the room was heavier than any noise I had ever heard in my life. It wasn't the silence of peace, or the quiet of a library, or the stillness of a sleeping house. It was a vacuum, a void that seemed to suck the air right out of my lungs, leaving me gasping for breath in a room that was perfectly climate-controlled. I stared at the clock on the wall, watching the second hand tick forward with a mechanical indifference that felt cruel. Tick, tick, tick. Each movement was a second of my life slipping away, a second I would never get back, and for the first time in 45 years, I was acutely, painfully aware of just how few of those seconds I might have left. Across the desk, Dr. Reynolds was speaking, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I could see his lips moving. I could see the sympathetic furrow of his brow, and I could see the way his hands were clasped tightly on top of the manila folder that contained my fate. But the words were dissolving before they reached my brain. I had to force myself to focus, to drag my mind back from the precipice of panic where it was teetering. I needed to hear it. I needed to hear him say it again, just to be sure that this wasn't some twisted nightmare brought on by stress or exhaustion. I needed the brutal confirmation of reality, no matter how much it threatened to destroy me. "I'm sorry, Thomas," he said, and the sound of my name in his mouth felt like an apology for a crime he hadn't committed. "The scans are conclusive. The progression has been much faster than we anticipated. At this stage, with the location of the tumor and the way it has aggressively metastasized to the surrounding organs, surgery isn't an option. And given your current blood work, chemotherapy would likely only reduce the quality of the time you have left, without significantly extending it." There it was, the sentence, the verdict. It hung in the air between us, suspended like a guillotine blade that had already fallen but hadn't yet severed the neck. I remember blinking, feeling the dry grit of my contact lenses against my eyes. I remember the smell of the antiseptic floor cleaner, a sharp, chemical scent that I knew would haunt me for the rest of my days. I remember the way the fluorescent light hummed, a low-frequency buzz that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. My hands were gripping the armrests of the chair so hard that my knuckles had turned white, resembling the bones of a skeleton. I took a breath, a shaky, shallow thing that rattled in my chest. "So," I started, my voice sounding foreign, scratchy and weak, like it belonged to an old man I didn't know. "What are you saying? You're saying there's nothing?" Dr. Reynolds sighed, a heavy exhalation that signaled his own defeat. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of fatigue that told me he had had this conversation too many times. "I'm saying that we need to shift our focus, Thomas. We need to talk about palliative care. We need to talk about pain management. We need to make sure you are comfortable. But as for a cure, medically speaking, we have exhausted our avenues. I can refer you to a specialist in the city for a second opinion, and I encourage you to do that, but I want to be honest with you. The prognosis is, it's terminal. Terminal. The word echoed in my skull, bouncing off the walls of my mind like a ricocheting bullet. Terminal meant end. Terminal meant a stop. Terminal meant that the story I was writing, the story of my life, was being cut off mid-sentence. I thought about the unfinished deck in the backyard. I thought about my daughter, Emily, who was graduating from college in 6 months. I thought about the trip to Italy my wife Sarah and I had been saving for since our honeymoon. All of those future tense verbs, will go, will see, will build, suddenly turned into dust. They weren't plans anymore. They were fantasies, delusions of a man who didn't know he was already a ghost, walking. I don't remember walking out of the office. I don't remember the elevator ride down or walking through the lobby where people were reading magazines and drinking coffee, oblivious to the fact that a man who had just been given a death sentence was walking among them. I only remember sitting in my car, the keys trembling in my hand, unable to put them in the ignition. The sun was shining. That was the most offensive part of it all. The sky was a brilliant, mocking blue, and the sun was casting golden light over the parking lot, glinting off the windshields of 100 cars. How could the world be so bright when mine had just gone pitch black? How could the birds be singing? How could life just go on? A wave of nausea rolled over me, not from the illness, but from the sheer, crushing weight of the fear. It was a primal terror, a cold hand gripping my heart and squeezing until I felt like I was going to pass out. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel once, twice, 3 times, screaming a soundless scream that tore at my throat. Why? The question that has plagued humanity since the dawn of suffering. Why me? I wasn't a saint, but I wasn't a villain. I paid my taxes, I loved my family, I went to church on Sundays, I tried to do right by my neighbors. Was this the reward? A biological betrayal that would wither me away before I even hit 50? I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked the same as I had that morning. Same dark hair with graying temples, same brown eyes, same slight stubble on my chin. But the man in the mirror was a stranger. He was a man with an expiration date stamped on his forehead that only he could see. I felt a profound sense of isolation, a loneliness so deep it felt like I was drifting in deep space. I had to go home. I had to go home and tell Sarah. The thought made my stomach twist into a knot so tight I doubled over. How do you tell the person you love that you are leaving them? How do you look into the eyes of your partner and shatter their world with a handful of words? I started the car, the engine roaring to life with a vitality I no longer possessed. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw a church steeple in the distance, rising above the trees. Usually, seeing the cross gave me a sense of comfort, a reminder of a higher power, of a plan. But today, looking at that cross, I didn't feel comfort. I felt abandoned. I felt a cold anger rising up, a bitterness that tasted like bile. Where was the plan in this? Where was the mercy? I drove in silence, the radio off, every red light feeling like a personal insult, every minute stretching into an hour. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a museum of a life that was ending. The lawn I had mowed on Saturday, the flower beds Sarah had planted, the basketball hoop that hadn't been used in years. It all looked like scenery for a play that had been canceled. I sat in the car for 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to compose a mask that wouldn't crumble the moment I walked through the door. I wasn't ready to say it. I wasn't ready to make it real by speaking it into existence. If I didn't say it, maybe, just for a few more hours, I could pretend it wasn't true. Maybe I could have one last dinner as a normal man, a husband with a future, before I became a patient, a statistic, a tragedy. I wiped my face, took a deep breath that filled my lungs with the scent of rain and cut grass, and opened the car door. My legs felt heavy, like lead weights were strapped to my ankles, as I walked up the path to the front door. I reached for the handle, and for a split second I hesitated. This was the threshold. Once I crossed it, everything changed. I turned the key, the lock clicked, a sound of finality, and I stepped into the shadow of my own house, carrying a darkness that no amount of light could dispel. I was a walking dead man, and I was about to break the heart of the only woman I had ever loved. The doctor said there was no cure, and in that moment, standing in my hallway, listening to Sarah humming in the kitchen, I believed him. I believed that hope had died in that office, leaving me with nothing but the cold, hard ticking of the clock. The smell of roasted garlic and oregano hit me the moment I walked into the kitchen, a scent that usually signaled comfort and warmth, but now just turned my stomach. Sarah was standing by the stove, her back to me, humming a tune I recognized faintly from the radio. She was wearing her favorite yellow apron, the one with the sunflower stain on the pocket from a gardening mishap years ago. She looked so normal, so beautifully, painfully ordinary, existing in a timeline where her husband wasn't dying. I stood in the doorway, paralyzed, feeling like an intruder in my own life. I was holding a grenade with the pin pulled, and I knew that the moment I opened my mouth, I would blow this peaceful domestic scene into oblivion. She turned around, a wooden spoon in her hand, a smile lighting up her face that didn't reach her eyes when she saw mine. Her smile faltered, then vanished, replaced by a look of instant, terrifying intuition. Wives know. They always know. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't ask about the traffic. She dropped the spoon. It clattered onto the counter, sending a spray of red sauce onto the pristine white tile, but she didn't even flinch. She just walked toward me, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes searching mine, pleading with me to tell her that her gut instinct was wrong. "Thomas," she whispered, and her voice cracked. That single syllable broke me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the strong, stoic husband. I collapsed. Not physically, but internally. The dam burst. I reached for her, burying my face in the crook of her neck, smelling her shampoo and the faint scent of flour. I held on to her with a desperation that must have bruised her ribs, and I felt her arms wrap around me, holding me up, even though she didn't yet know the weight of what she was carrying. "It's bad, Sarah," I choked out, the words tearing at my throat like broken glass. They said there's nothing they can do." I felt her body stiffen, a physical rejection of the words. She pulled back, grabbing my face between her hands, forcing me to look at her. Her eyes were swimming with tears, but there was a fierce denial in them. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, they're wrong. Doctors are wrong all the time, Tom. We'll get another opinion. We'll go to Mayo. We'll go anywhere. We are not giving up." Hearing her use the word "we" twisted the knife deeper. There was no "we" in the coffin. That was the one journey I had to take alone. But looking at her, I couldn't crush that spark of fight just yet. I nodded, a weak, lying nod, just to keep her from shattering completely right there on the kitchen floor. That night was the longest of my life. We lay in bed, the lights off, the room submerged in a heavy, suffocating darkness. Usually, Sarah sleeping next to me was a source of peace, her rhythmic breathing a lullaby that drifted me off to sleep. Tonight, every breath she took sounded like a countdown. I stared at the ceiling fan, a vague shape in the gloom, and played the doctor's words over and over in my head like a cursed tape loop. Metastatic, aggressive, terminal. I tried to pray. I closed my eyes and tried to summon the faith that had been a quiet, steady background hum in my life for decades. I reached out into the dark, whispering inside my mind, "God, are you there? Please, not now, not like this." But there was no answer. No warm wash of peace, no whisper of assurance. Just the silence of the house and the terrifying vastness of the universe. It felt like the line had been cut. It felt like God had left the building, or maybe, darker still, that he had never been there at all, and I was just a biological machine, breaking down in an indifferent cosmos. The fear was a physical thing, a cold sweat that soaked the sheets. I looked at Sarah's sleeping form and felt a wave of premature grief so potent it made me gasp. I was mourning her while I was still alive. I was mourning the mornings I wouldn't see, the coffee I wouldn't make her, the protection I could no longer provide. The weeks that followed were a blur of gray. The shock wore off, replaced by a dull, aching reality. We went to the specialist, just as Dr. Reynolds had suggested. We sat in another waiting room, filled with other people who looked too thin, too pale, too tired. We looked at different charts, different scans, but the verdict was a carbon copy of the first. The cancer was a wildfire, and it had already burned through the fire breaks. The second doctor was kinder, perhaps, softer in his delivery, but the message was the same. Get your affairs in order. Go home. Be with your family. Leaving that second appointment, the last shred of denial evaporated. Sarah didn't say no this time. She didn't talk about fighting. She just held my hand in the car, her grip tight and trembling, and stared out the window at the passing city as if she didn't recognize it. We returned to a house that felt like a tomb. The silence grew. Friends stopped calling, or when they did, their voices were pitched high with that terrible, pitying tone that made me want to scream. They didn't know what to say to a man who was dying, so they said nothing, or they said meaningless platitudes like, "Everything happens for a reason." I wanted to punch the next person who told me that. What reason could there be for leaving my wife a widow at 48? What reason could there be for this pain that was starting to gnaw at my side? A dull throb that was becoming a sharp, stabbing reminder of the invader inside me. I started to withdraw. It wasn't intentional, but I couldn't help it. I felt like I was already separated from the living by a thick sheet of glass. I watched Emily, my daughter, when she came home for the weekend. She was vibrant, full of life, talking about her finals and her boyfriend, and I sat there in the armchair, a blanket over my legs because I couldn't get warm anymore, just watching her mouth move. I didn't want to tell her. Sarah and I had agreed to wait until after her exams, so I had to wear the mask. I had to smile and ask about her classes, while inside I was screaming. I felt like a ghost haunting my own living room. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after the diagnosis, I was alone in the house. Sarah had gone to the grocery store, a simple errand that felt monumental now. I tried to get up to get a glass of water. As I stood, a wave of dizziness hit me, followed by a pain in my abdomen so sharp it doubled me over. My legs, which had carried me up mountains and across finish lines, buckled. I hit the floor hard, my shoulder taking the impact. I lay there on the rug, gasping, staring at the dust motes, dancing in the shaft of sunlight coming through the window. I couldn't get up. I physically couldn't lift my own weight. Lying there, helpless as an infant, the despair finally overtook the fear. This was it. This was the end. Not a bang, but a whimper. A man lying on his own floor, too weak to reach the sink. I rolled onto my back, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes, hot and stinging. I looked up at the ceiling and let out a laugh, a dry, bitter sound. "Is this the plan?" I shouted into the empty room. "Is this your great mercy? To humiliate me? To strip me of everything before you kill me?" I waited for a lightning bolt. I waited for anger, but there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator. I felt completely, utterly abandoned. I closed my eyes and wished, with every fiber of my being, that I would just stop breathing right there, that my heart would just give up and save me the indignity of the next few months. I was done. I had surrendered. The doctor was right. There was no cure. And worse, I was starting to believe there was no God, just biology and bad luck. I lay there for 20 minutes until I heard the key in the lock. When Sarah walked in and saw me, she dropped the grocery bags. Eggs cracked, milk spilled. She ran to me, falling to her knees, gathering me into her arms. She was crying, apologizing, trying to lift me. But as I looked into her terrified eyes, I didn't see hope anymore. I saw the reflection of my own death, and I knew, with a certainty that froze my blood, that unless a miracle happened, this was how my story ended. On the floor, broken and alone in the dark. The fall on the rug was the turning point. It was the moment I stopped being a man living with cancer and became a cancer patient. The transition was brutal and swift. We moved a hospital bed into the living room because the stairs to the bedroom had become an insurmountable mountain range. My world, once expansive and full of travel and work and potential, shrank to the four walls of that room. The view from the window, the oak tree in the front yard, the mailman's daily route, the neighbor's cat stalking a squirrel, became my only entertainment, my only connection to a world that was rapidly spinning away from me. I watched life happen outside. A silent movie I was no longer cast in. The pain management nurses started coming. They were kind, efficient angels of mercy who spoke in soft voices and adjusted drips, but their presence was a constant reminder of my decline. The house began to smell of disinfectant and sickness, a cloying, sweet odor that no amount of air freshener could mask. Sarah was a warrior. I watched her transform from a partner into a caretaker, a role she took on with a fierce, terrifying dedication. She slept on the couch next to my bed, waking at every groan, every shift of my sheets. I saw the circles under her eyes darken, the lines around her mouth deepen. I was killing her, slowly, just by dying myself. One Tuesday, about 2 months into this purgatory, the pain was particularly bad. It wasn't just the physical agony, which was a constant, gnawing companion, but the mental anguish. It was a rainy afternoon, the sky a bruised purple, mirroring my mood. I had refused lunch. I had refused to talk. I was sinking into a deep, dark depression, a hole so deep I couldn't see the light at the top anymore. Sarah had gone to the pharmacy to pick up a new prescription, leaving me alone with my thoughts, which were my worst enemies. I lay there, staring at the rain streaking the window pane, tracing the path of a single drop as it merged with others and vanished. Just like me, I thought bitterly. Just a drop in the rain, washing away. I closed my eyes, drifting into a morphine-hazed doze when a sound startled me awake. It was a knock at the front door. Not the polite rap of a delivery man, but a hesitant, soft tapping. I ignored it. I wasn't receiving visitors. I wasn't receiving anyone. But the knocking persisted. Tap, tap, tap. Then silence. Then again. It was annoying, persistent, like a mosquito buzzing in my ear. "Go away," I rasped, though I knew no one could hear me through the heavy oak door. I waited for them to leave. Instead, I heard the door handle jiggle. It was locked, of course. Then a voice, muffled, high-pitched, calling through the wood. "Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas, are you in there?" I frowned. The voice sounded familiar, but my brain was too foggy to place it. It wasn't an adult. It was a child. Curiosity, a sensation I hadn't felt in weeks, pricked at me. Who would be calling for me? A child? I tried to sit up, gritting my teeth against the spike of pain in my side. "Who is it?" I yelled, summoning as much volume as my weak lungs could manage. There was a pause. Then, "It's Leo, from down the street, the one with the bike." Leo. The memory clicked into place. The neighbor's kid, the one who had ridden his bike into my prize-winning hydrangeas last summer. I had yelled at him then, a grumpy old man reaction I now regretted. What was he doing here? I can't come to the door, Leo," I shouted back, exhausted by the effort. "I'm sick." "I know," the voice chirped back, undeterred. "Mom said you're really sick. That's why I came. Can you look out the window? The big one?" The window next to my bed. I hesitated. Every movement was a cost. Was it worth it? But the sheer oddity of the request, the innocent persistence in his voice, made me move. Slowly, painfully, I dragged myself up on one elbow and pulled back the curtain. There he was, standing on the porch in a bright yellow raincoat that was 2 sizes too big, clutching a soggy cardboard box. He looked like a drowned duck. When he saw my face at the window, gaunt, pale, a shadow of the man who used to chase him off the lawn, his eyes widened. But he didn't run. He didn't look away in horror like the adults did. He grinned, a missing tooth, wide, genuine grin that seemed to cut through the gloom of the afternoon. He held up the box towards the glass. I squinted. Inside, nestled on a bed of wet grass, was a turtle. A small, muddy, ordinary box turtle. I was baffled. I unlocked the window latch and cranked it open a few inches, the damp air rushing in, smelling of wet earth. What is this, Leo?" I asked, bewildered. "It's a get-well turtle," he announced proudly, as if this were a recognized medical treatment. "I found him in the creek. He's really tough, Mr. Thomas. He has a shell that protects him from everything, even cars. I saw him almost get squished, but he just pulled his head in and he was fine." He looked at the turtle with reverence, then back at me. "I thought, maybe you could borrow him, just for a bit, so you can learn how to hide inside your shell until the bad stuff goes away." I stared at the boy. I stared at the turtle. And for the first time in 2 months, I felt something crack in my chest. It wasn't a rib. It was the wall I had built around my heart. This child, who I had scolded over flowers, had brought me a muddy reptile because he thought it would teach me how to survive. The logic was so flawed, so childish, and yet so profoundly beautiful. You want me to have the turtle?" I stammered, my voice thick with sudden emotion. "Just to borrow," Leo corrected seriously. "His name is Tank. He needs lettuce. But you can keep him right there on the sill. He likes to watch the rain, too." He carefully placed the box on the window ledge, pushing it under the shelter of the overhang. "He's strong," Leo added, looking me dead in the eye. "Like you. My dad said you're the strongest guy on the block because you built that deck all by yourself. Tank is strong, too. You guys can be a team." He gave me a thumbs up, turned around, and hopped off the porch, splashing into a puddle with his yellow boots before disappearing down the street. I was left alone with Tank. I looked at the turtle. He had indeed pulled his head in, just a muddy rock in a box. But as I watched, slowly, tentatively, a wrinkled head poked out. A small black eye blinked at me. He was still there. He was alive. He was cautious, but he was present. "Tank," I whispered. "You and me, buddy." I laid back down, but I didn't close the curtain. I watched the turtle, and as I watched, a strange thought occurred to me. Leo hadn't said goodbye. He hadn't said, "I'm sorry." He had said, "You guys can be a team." He spoke in the present tense. He spoke of the future. He didn't see a dying man. He saw a man who needed a teammate. That night, when Sarah came home, she found me sitting up, awake. She looked at the box on the windowsill. "Thomas? What is that?" she asked, confused. "That's Tank," I said. And to her shock and mine, I smiled. A real, small, fragile smile. "He's my consultant. He's teaching me about defense." Sarah started to cry, dropping her purse. She rushed over and hugged me, weeping into my chest. I stroked her hair, looking over her shoulder at the turtle. The pain was still there. The cancer was still there. But the room felt different. The air wasn't so heavy. A child's nonsensical act of kindness had punched a hole in the darkness, and a tiny pinprick of light was shining through. It wasn't a cure, but it was something I hadn't had in a long time. It was a reason to look at the window tomorrow. It was a start. That start, as fragile as it was, gave me the courage to face the one thing I had been dreading more than death itself: telling my daughter. Emily came home 3 days after the turtle incident, her car pulling into the driveway with the exuberant honk that usually signaled the beginning of a joyful weekend. From my bed in the living room, I heard the engine cut, the heavy thud of the car door, and the rapid click-clack of her boots on the pavement. She was rushing, eager, full of stories about her finals and plans for the summer. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with the rhythm of life, but with the erratic, panicked beat of a trapped bird. Sarah met her at the door. I heard the muffled greetings, the high-pitched excitement in Emily's voice, and then the sudden, confused drop in volume as she must have seen the look on her mother's face. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then, the footsteps approached the living room, slow, hesitant, unlike the confident stride of the girl who had arrived seconds ago. When she appeared in the doorway, dropping her backpack on the floor, she looked at the hospital bed, the oxygen tank in the corner, the array of pill bottles on the side table, and finally, at me. The color drained from her face so fast, it was terrifying. She looked like she had been struck physically. "Dad?" she whispered, the word trembling in the air. I tried to sit up, to be the strong father figure she needed, but my body betrayed me. I could only lift my hand. "Come here, Em," I said, my voice rasping. She crossed the room in 2 strides and collapsed onto the side of the bed, burying her face in my chest. I held her, feeling her tears soak through my shirt, hot and fast. I told her everything. The diagnosis, the failed treatment, the timeline. I didn't sugarcoat it, I couldn't. She needed the truth, no matter how jagged it was. Hearing my own voice say the words, "I'm dying," to my 21-year-old daughter was a specialized form of torture I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. She didn't scream. She didn't wail. She just shook. She vibrated with a grief so profound, it felt like the room was shaking with her. I stroked her hair, whispering the same empty reassurances I had heard for weeks. "It's okay. It's going to be okay." But we both knew it wasn't. I was leaving her. I wouldn't walk her down the aisle. I wouldn't hold her children. I was becoming a memory in real time, and the pain of that realization was sharper than any tumor. That night, the house was filled with a heavy, sorrowful quiet. Emily and Sarah sat with me for hours, watching old movies, pretending to watch, really just sitting in the vigil of the dying. But as the night wore on, the adrenaline of the emotional reveal wore off, and my body crashed. It was a steep, violent decline. The pain, which had been a background hum, cranked up to a deafening roar. My fever spiked. I started drifting in and out of consciousness, the faces of my wife and daughter blurring into abstract shapes. I could hear them whispering. I could feel cool cloths on my forehead, but I felt like I was being pulled backward into a dark tunnel. The doctor had said months, then weeks, but now, feeling the icy grip in my marrow, I knew we were talking about days, maybe hours. The monster inside was done playing with its food. It was time to finish the meal. By 3 a.m., the house was finally asleep. Sarah had passed out from sheer exhaustion in the recliner next to me, her hand hanging limp over the armrest. Emily was asleep on the rug, curled up like she used to when she was 5. I was the only one awake, trapped in the prison of my failing body. The pain was blinding, a white-hot lance in my side, but my mind was strangely, terrifyingly lucid. I looked at the shadows stretching across the ceiling. This was it, the valley of the shadow of death. I was walking through it, and I was alone. The anger I had felt earlier, the bitterness, it all evaporated, leaving only a desperate, naked fear. I looked at the turtle, Tank, still in his box on the sill, a silent sentry. "You're still here," I whispered. "I'm still here." I needed to know. I couldn't leave this world without knowing. With a surge of effort that made black spots dance in my vision, I reached for the nightstand. My hand knocked over a bottle of painkillers, sending them skittering across the floor, but I didn't care. My fingers closed around the old leather-bound Bible that Sarah had placed there weeks ago. I hadn't opened it. I had treated it like a coaster, a prop, but now it was my only lifeline. I dragged it into the bed, the leather cool against my feverish skin. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the cover. I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what to read. I just let the book fall open, the pages fluttering like the wings of a dove, and pressed my hand onto the paper. "God," I whispered, the words scraping out of my throat. "I am not asking for a cure anymore. I know that ship has sailed. I'm not asking for more time. I'm just asking, are you there? Because I am terrified. I am so scared of the dark. If you are real, if any of this is real, I need you to show me, not a sign, not a feeling, you. I need to know that I'm not just disappearing into nothingness." Tears streamed down my face, hot and salty. "Don't let me die alone. Please, just be here." I looked down at the page my hand was resting on. The room was dim, lit only by the street lamp outside, but a beam of light seemed to cut through the gloom, illuminating the text under my thumb. It wasn't a random verse. It wasn't a genealogy list. My eyes focused, blurring and sharpening until the words locked into place. It was from the book of Isaiah, chapter 38. I read the words, and my breath hitched in my chest. "I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life." I stared at the words. I blinked, thinking it was a hallucination, a cruel trick of a dying brain. I read it again. "I have heard your prayer and seen your tears." A jolt of electricity, unlike anything I had ever felt. Not pain, not heat, but a raw, vibrating power shot through my spine. It started at the base of my neck and surged downward, wrapping around my torso, penetrating deep into the place where the sickness lived. It wasn't the gentle warmth of comfort. It was a fire. A consuming, roaring fire that made me gasp aloud. My back arched off the mattress, my fingers gripping the sheets. It felt like I was being unmade and put back together all at once. The air in the room suddenly became heavy, charged with ozone, like the atmosphere right before a lightning strike. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. It was a presence so massive, so heavy, that I felt like I was being pressed into the mattress by a giant hand. I tried to call out to Sarah, but I couldn't speak. The fire in my body was intensifying, focusing on the tumor, burning with a specificity that was agonizing and ecstatic all at once. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching the Bible to my chest, riding the waves of this invisible storm. Was this death? Was this the soul ripping free from the body? It didn't feel like fading. It felt like waking up. It felt like an infusion of life so potent my decayed system couldn't handle it. I heard a sound then, not with my ears, but inside my head. A voice that sounded like rushing water, like thunder, like a whisper. It simply said, "It is not finished." And then the world went white. A blinding, pure white light swallowed the room, swallowed the pain, swallowed the fear, and I fell into it, surrendering completely to the fire that was burning me alive. I didn't know if I would wake up in heaven or in this bed, but for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I was held. I opened my eyes. That was the first miracle. The sheer act of lifting my eyelids felt momentous, like lifting a heavy curtain to reveal a stage I wasn't supposed to be standing on anymore. I expected the white light of the afterlife, or perhaps the eternal darkness of the void. Instead, I saw the familiar, cracked stucco of my living room ceiling. The morning sun was streaming through the window, hitting the dust motes just like it always did. But the quality of the light was different. It wasn't the harsh, mocking glare of the day I was diagnosed. It was soft, golden, renewed. I lay there for a moment, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, waiting for the familiar crushing weight of the pain to settle onto my chest. I waited for the nausea, the weakness, the feeling of my own cells eating me alive. But there was silence. My body, which had been a screaming cacophony of agony for months, was quiet. The sharp, stabbing lance in my side was gone, replaced by a dull, strange ache that felt more like a healing bruise than a growing cancer. I took a breath, a deep, full breath that expanded my lungs all the way to the bottom. No coughing fit, no rattle, just air. Sweet, oxygen-rich air. I sat up. The movement was fluid. Weak, yes, my muscles had atrophied from weeks of bed rest, but the mechanical failure, the blockage that had made movement impossible yesterday, wasn't there. The sheets fell away from me. I looked at my hands. They were still thin, the veins prominent, but they weren't shaking. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and put my feet on the floor. The carpet felt solid, grounding. Across the room, Sarah stirred in the recliner. Her neck was craned at an uncomfortable angle, her face pale and drawn even in sleep. She looked exhausted, a soldier who had been on watch for too long. I watched her for a moment, overwhelmed by a wave of love so powerful it made my eyes sting. Then my stomach growled. It was a loud rumble of a sound, a primal demand for fuel. I hadn't felt hunger, real, genuine hunger, in 3 months. The very thought of food had been repulsive. Now I wanted toast, I wanted eggs, I wanted coffee. "Sarah," I said. My voice was no longer a rasp. It was clear. Rusty, but clear. She jerked awake, gasping, her eyes flying open with the panic of someone expecting a disaster. She looked at the bed, expecting to see me unconscious or worse. When she saw me sitting on the edge of the mattress, her eyes widened until I thought they might pop. She scrambled out of the chair, tripping over the blanket. "Thomas? Thomas? What are you doing? Lay down. You can't." She reached for me, her hands trembling, expecting me to collapse. I caught her hands. They were cold. Mine were warm. "I'm okay," I said, and the words felt like diamonds in my mouth. "Sarah, I think I'm hungry." She froze. She stared at me, scanning my face, looking for the delirium, the fever. But she saw my eyes. They weren't glassy anymore. They were present. "Hungry?" she whispered, as if I had asked for a spaceship. You want to eat?" "I want eggs," I said, smiling. "And maybe some of that bacon we have in the freezer." She burst into tears. Not the despairing tears of the night before, but confused, terrified, hopeful tears. She touched my forehead. "Your fever is gone," she murmured, shock coloring her tone. "Tom, you're cool. You look different." Emily walked in then, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and the scene played out again. The shock, the disbelief, the tentative hope. We ate breakfast. It was the most surreal meal of my life. I sat at the table, actually at the table, and ate 2 eggs. Every bite tasted like victory, but beneath the joy, there was a terrifying question. Was this the rally? The phenomenon nurses talked about where a dying patient suddenly gets a burst of energy right before the end? Was this the candle flaring up before it went out? I looked at Sarah. She was thinking the same thing. The fear was still there, lurking behind her smile. "We need to go to the doctor," I said, putting down my fork. "We need to go now." The drive to the hospital was a mirror image of the first one, but inverted. The sky was gray today, but inside the car, the atmosphere was electric. We didn't speak. We were afraid to jinx it. We were afraid to say out loud what we were all thinking. Could it be? When we walked into Dr. Reynolds' office, the receptionist did a double take. She had clearly not expected to see me walking in on my own 2 feet. She scrambled to get the nurse. When the nurse came out, her jaw literally dropped. Mr. Thompson?" she stammered. We had you scheduled for a home hospice visit today. What are you doing here?" "I need a scan," I said, my voice steady. "I need you to look again." They tried to argue. They told me it was unnecessary, that the radiation from the scans was pointless for a man in my condition, that I should go home and rest. But I insisted. I refused to leave. "Doctor." Reynolds finally came out, looking harried and annoyed. When he saw me standing there, leaning against the counter but upright, his annoyance vanished, replaced by pure confusion. He knew my chart. He knew I shouldn't be standing. "Thomas," he said slowly, "you look surprisingly well, but a scan isn't going to change the pathology." "Humor me," I said. "Please, just look." I lay in the MRI tube again. The clanging, banging, rhythmic thumping of the magnets usually made me feel claustrophobic, like I was already in a coffin. Today, it sounded like a war drum. It sounded like construction work. I closed my eyes and prayed, not for healing this time, but for revelation. "Show them," I whispered in the darkness of the machine. "Show them what you did." The scan took 45 minutes. 45 minutes of lying perfectly still, feeling the strange absence of the pain that had been my constant companion. When they slid me out, the technician didn't say a word. He didn't make eye contact. He just helped me sit up and said, "Dr. Reynolds is reviewing the images now. Please wait in the consult room." We waited. 10 minutes, 20, 30. The clock on the wall ticked, just like it had that first day, but now the ticking didn't sound like a countdown. It sounded like a heartbeat. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Reynolds walked in. He wasn't holding a folder this time. He was holding a tablet, and he was looking at it as if it were an alien artifact. He didn't sit down. He didn't look at Sarah. He walked straight to the light board on the wall and plugged the tablet in, bringing up 2 images side by side. He started, then stopped. He cleared his throat. He looked at me, then at the screen, then back at me. He looked shaken. Truly, deeply shaken. A man of science who had just run headfirst into a wall of impossibility. "This image on the left," he said, pointing to a mass of white, cloudy webs that choked my organs, "is from 3 weeks ago. This is the tumor, extensive, invasive, fatal." He paused, his hand hovering over the second image. "This image on the right was taken 20 minutes ago." The screen showed clear, dark spaces. The white webs were gone, not shrunk, not reduced, gone. There was a small patch of scar tissue, a calcified remnant like a footprint in the sand, but the mass itself had vanished. "There is no active disease," he whispered. The words sucked the air out of the room. I checked the machine. I thought it was a calibration error. We ran a second sequence. It's the same." He turned to me, his eyes wide, stripping away the professional veneer. "Thomas, medically speaking, this doesn't happen. Spontaneous remission is rare, but this is disappearance. It's like it was never there. I can't explain this. I have no medical explanation for what I am seeing." Sarah let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. She collapsed into the chair, covering her face. Emily grabbed my arm, digging her fingernails in, shaking. I looked at the screen. I looked at the clean black void where the monster used to be. I remembered the fire. I remembered the voice. "It is not finished." I looked Dr. Reynolds in the eye. He was waiting for me to ask how. He was waiting for me to demand a scientific rationale. But I just smiled, a calm, knowing smile that felt like it belonged to someone else. "I know you can't explain it, doctor," I said softly, "but I can." The room fell silent, heavy with the weight of the unexplainable, as the realization of the miracle finally, truly landed. The science had ended. Something else had begun. I looked at Dr. Reynolds, whose face was a study in scientific bewilderment. He was waiting for an explanation he could publish, a pathology report he could sign, a medical mechanism he could categorize. But the answer I gave him wasn't in his textbooks. "Doctor," I said, my voice gentle, 3 weeks ago, I asked God to show me that I wasn't dying alone. I wasn't praying for a cure. I was praying for proof of His presence. And when I opened my Bible, I read the words, 'I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life.' That fire I felt in the middle of the night, that was the answer. That was the hand of the Creator overriding biology. You are right to say this is a medical impossibility. That's precisely what makes it a miracle." Reynolds didn't refute me. He couldn't. He stared at the screen, at the clean space where death had been incubating, and all he could do was shake his head slowly, a profound respect replacing his confusion. "Well, Thomas," he finally said, his voice husky, "I don't know what cured you, All I know is that you are unequivocally healthy. Go home. Live your life. We'll monitor you monthly. But congratulations. Walking out of that hospital, I felt like a newborn. The heavy glass doors slid open, and I stepped out into the air, no longer a patient, no longer a dying man, but a man given a second chance, a man resurrected. Sarah and Emily clung to my arms, laughing and weeping all at once. The joy was uncontrollable, raw, pouring out of us like a fountain. We drove home, and the world outside the car window was vibrant, detailed, and utterly beautiful. I noticed the specific shade of red on a stop sign, the sound of children playing down the street, the deep green of the grass. All the details I had grown too numb to see were screaming with life. The old fear was gone, replaced by an overwhelming, almost terrifying sense of responsibility. This life was no longer mine to waste. It was a gift, signed and delivered in fire and grace. The first thing I did when we got home was walk straight to the living room. Tank was still there, sitting patiently in his box on the windowsill. He looked up at me with his small, ancient eye. I knelt down, ignoring the stiffness in my knees, and gently picked him up. He was light, resilient, a tiny symbol of the fortitude I had needed to borrow. "Thank you, buddy," I whispered. "You did your job. You taught me how to wait out the storm." Later that afternoon, Sarah made an elaborate, celebratory meal: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, all the comfort food we had avoided for months. But before we ate, we held hands around the table, and for the first time, our prayer was not one of desperate begging, but of overwhelming, joyous thanks. Emily wept as she thanked God for giving her father back. Sarah thanked him for giving her partner back. And I thanked him, not just for the healing, but for the answer, for the unmistakable proof that faith was not a fragile thing, but the ultimate reality. A few days later, I walked down the street to Leo's house. I was wearing real clothes, not pajamas, and the sun felt warm on my face. When Leo opened the door, he looked at me, and his eyes didn't widen with pity. They widened with recognition. "Mr. Thomas," he shouted, truly excited. "You're walking. You're outside the window." I knelt down to his level, holding Tank in my hands. "I am, Leo," I said, "and I'm better. Tank and we won. You taught me a good lesson. You reminded me how strong a shell can be." I handed the turtle back to him. Leo took Tank with great seriousness, placing him gently back into his own cardboard habitat. "I knew it," he announced, with the certainty only a child possesses. "He's very tough, Mr. Thomas. You should keep being tough, too." It was the simplest, most profound commission I could have received. The miracle wasn't the end of the journey. It was the start of the next assignment. The years that followed were a testament to that promise. I lived past the predicted deadline of my disease. I lived past the 15 years I was promised in that sacred text. And I learned the ultimate truth. The doctor was right when he said there was no cure in this world. Science had reached its limit, and that is not an indictment of science, but a simple statement of fact. It's at that limit, at the final, desperate edge of human capability, that the divine possibility begins. My cure didn't come from a pill or a procedure. It came from an act of surrender. It came from admitting my fear and asking not for my will, but for His presence. If you are watching this, and you are sitting in the dark, and you are hearing the terrible verdict of the world, whether it's a terminal diagnosis, a financial collapse, or a broken relationship, I want you to understand one thing. The word impossible is a measurement of human effort. It is not a measurement of divine power. When the world says there is no cure, the heavens might be preparing an answer you cannot see, a solution that defies every equation. Don't confuse human expertise with ultimate authority. Don't confuse a moment of despair with the end of your story. I was saved when I stopped fighting to live and started simply asking to be held. I was healed when I surrendered my outcome. My life is proof that God will meet you at your absolute lowest, at the foot of your hospital bed, in the quiet darkness of your deepest fear. He heard my prayer. He saw my tears. And He proved undeniably that when the doctor gives up hope, that is precisely where true, eternal hope begins. Don't look at the size of the mountain. Look at the size of the hand that can move it. Your story is not finished. Not yet. Believe.